again, Stu. Great to be talking. Unstoppable Flux. We're here, we're live to talk about, what are we going to talk about this week? What's on your mind? What do we think?
Well, this was one that it sort of flowed out the last conversation we had that maybe, and man, it was only a few days ago we last spoke, but how has the world shifted in that week? And what we'd said we were going to talk about, and I still think is completely valid, is have we all been in survival mode for too long? Because survival mode means that there's a certain part of our brain that we use in survival mode, and that part of the brain stops us being able to operate in tribes. It stops us being able to do proper analytical thinking. So if we're in survival mode, what does that say as leaders? If we're in survival mode, what does that say for our teams? What does it say for our business growth?
I think that really resonates. I think a lot of people listening will understand that. But how do I know? So we're all surviving. But and I think that's really interesting, the physiological pieces you're pulling in there. But how would I know if I'm a leader and I go, I've been really tough? What are some of the signals that I'm actually in survival mode?
Yeah, it is great. And I think the assumption that we almost come to, and this has been proven neurologically, the assumption that we must all start at is that we are operating in our reptilian brain. We are in panic mode. So I love this. There's your reptilian brain, and wrapped around your reptilian brain is your mammalian brain. This is your storytelling. This is familial. This is tribe. And then on top of that is our human brain, our thinking brain. And you can't go from reptilian brain, survival brain, into analytical thinking brain without first going through, I'm part of a community, that mammalian brain. And what that means, if we just accept that we're always in beta 3, this is the brainwave function that we all have, the frequency of our brainwaves. If we're all operating at that reptilian brain level, then it's a good place to start, because then we can do something about it. And there are very, very simple tools that we can use to bring ourselves down from that beta 3 level, that reptilian brain, into the analytical brain. And that's when you notice it, because the challenge here is that we don't know that we're always in reptilian brain. We don't know that we are in survival state because we've been in it for such a long time. So if we accept that we're in that state, then we can do something about it.
You use that word community, right? So in terms of getting to the mammalian brain, and I love that sort of visual that you had. And when you say community, that's about taking the time to stop, connect, to listen, to be in a different flow. And that's something I think, we've seen a lot of in flux with when CEOs are really under pressure, it is that chance for them to connect with like-minded people to share. And that's kind of what you're meaning, right? It's who is your tribe? And that community can be your leadership team. It can be your family, I'm guessing. What?
It can be anyone. I mean, what we see, as we live in this stressed world, is that we close down, we close in, we talk to less people. Our circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We close the door just to get some peace and quiet. But what we're actually doing is we're shutting other people out. And actually, going to the water cooler, going to the coffee machine, spending time with other people, it causes us to then be in that group. And even you being in that group, it causes us, you quite often see people sighing when they come out and they're actually in a group. And that's actually your body releasing the cortisol that's been locked inside for such a long time. And you just begin to go, oh, wow. And that's one of the tools that we can use to say, this is how we move, right? And that's why I'm quite sure. I saw it this morning. We had the we had the first encounter, the kickoff call for the 418 group this morning, and I'm quite sure you see it at the CEO tables. Is very early on, it's quite quiet. No one's talking. There's maybe small chat going on between a couple of people at the table, but there's that sense of anticipation in the room of what's going to happen. That's that brain. That's that brain waiting for the saber-toothed tiger to leap through the door and eat everyone. But then there's that realization, some come to it sooner than others. But then that realization of, actually, this is a safe environment. I feel that I can talk, and then those conversations start. I mean, this is if we look at humanity, way back, we would sit around campfires. Back then, they were called fires, but we'd sit around fires and we would tell stories. And then we'd recognize the stories being told around that fire, the same as the stories. Oh, well, maybe we get together and we sit in a bigger group. And then there'll be other fireplaces for different stories being told. That's the history of the tribes growing into nations. And what you see around your CEO table is exactly the same. And once you're maybe the second or third time people come back to the table, if they do, you've got to bring the noise down to actually get focused on the subject, because people are into it. I know that the 418, by the time they finish their first muster in June, they will be such a cohesive bunch because they're no longer in reptilian brain. They've moved into that mammalian safe space. I feel part of a tribe, and that's why your CEO table is such a powerful event for people that have ended up lonely. I don't like the phrase leadership is lonely, or the loneliness of command. That's a choice we make, but it's not a choice like that. It's a drift towards that loneliness. And I mean, that's the great work that both of our organizations do.
Yeah, look, thank you. And I think back to the tables now, because we've just rolled out our third one. You're right, where there's a cohort that have been there before, it's quicker to get going, right? Because they feel safe. In Wellington, it was definitely quieter at the beginning because it was the first time and it's really, I think we forget that, there's actually a physiological aspect of feeling safe and what that allows us to do. And I think this leads into, in survival mode, we're all just doing. It's reaction, isn't it? So we are unable to think about our environment in a way that allows us to break biases or pattern thinking or whatever that looks like, because we're just trying to make sure that the saber-toothed tiger doesn't suddenly surprise us and rip a leg off. And I see more and more CEOs struggling with that challenge of, when do I think? When is my time to be able to not necessarily be always in the fire, in the doing? And how, especially with your groups, how do you encourage your leaders to do that, to separate the doing from the thinking time and thinking of the business, right?
So we've got a number of tools that we use. I mean, the key one is the once they get started is the monthly accountability call, and linked to that is the WhatsApp group, so that they've always got the opportunity to be talking together. The other thing that we introduced, and then we stopped, but we've started it again, is we actually run. It's basically a book club. So every 4 to 6 weeks, every member of either the 520 or the 418, they get a book from me in the post, something that I'm reading or something that I think is valuable. The first book that the 520 got this year was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So we introduce other different things that is not work stuff. You've been a guest on the Unstoppable Huddle. So there's another opportunity for people to come together and sit quietly in that space to think about something different. All of those are opportunities to go, oh, I'm getting the opportunity to think. Because one of the things that doesn't happen when we're at beta 3 or when we're in this reptilian mode, we're in constantly in reaction mode. we react. We do something we've done before. There is no opportunity to be response able. And that's when we begin to settle down. When we are response able, we start using our imagination again, or we start to innovate, we start to ideate. That can't happen up here because all we're doing is dealing with the saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah. And look, I think that's the challenge for businesses right now, for leaders around growth, isn't it? It's that all the levers for growth that used to work are not working. The world, if you're dealing in supply chain or distribution, that obviously that whole aspect of your business is in free fall and there's a lot of uncertainty. So New Zealand businesses growing offshore are at the behest of the trade winds, good and bad. Right now, mostly challenging. So how, and I think a lot of the conversations we have with leaders is how they do grow and scale. What do you think's holding us back as I'm going to say country, but actually as a leadership cohort, right? New Zealand business owners. What is holding us back? What are you seeing is holding them back from growth, achieving growth? Because that's the ultimate goal, right?
Completely. Yeah, why does anyone start a business? It's almost, we start businesses in order to grow the business to the point that the business runs itself, so that we get that life that we feel that we do deserve. Why are we struggling with growth at the moment is because we don't have the capacity to find innovative, and I just sort of repeating what was said, but we don't have the capacity for that innovation to go, well, let's use an example, because we talk about AI fairly often. I know that I can use AI to make my business go faster, be smarter, but I don't have the capacity to spend the time in there in order to understand which bits of AI I can be using in order to make that work. There are opportunities out there to say, right, do things differently. New Zealand as a small rock, a long rock in the Southern Ocean, and we get all of our fuel from offshore. And we using our imagination here.
That is that. I think that ship is almost sailed, even though it's blocked in the Strait of Hormuz. But it's too late for us to problem solve that. But I think it raises this problem, and we talked at the beginning a little bit about this idea of thinking space. But what we're noticing more and more in our clients, and even at the CEO table, is that I'm busy. Oh no, we're busy. I'm really busy. Busy is now becoming a bit of a risk signal, and I'm noticing that it's actually, you go and sit down with leaders, CEOs, leadership teams, they talk about how busy they are. But actually that busyness is holding us back. And now I can begin to, when you sit down with a leader who we know is busy, but it doesn't talk about how busy he is, you go, great, this is a leader who's beginning to understand that it is not about how busy, it is about the type of work that needs to be done, the thinking. Versus leaders who are I'm busy, we're busy, I'm too busy to do that. No, I don't have time. The team's so busy. That now I'm thinking is a risk signal, because what that is decreasing their chance to think, to disrupt, or to even begin to understand, okay, so given what's going on right now in the global supply chain, that is going to change. There is going to be some shifts. Obviously, we've got, what happened yesterday, new large tax on shipments of oil coming out will impact fertilizer and helium. They're talking about, that's going to impact the production of computer chips, processing power, etc. So what does that mean? And this is the bit, if I'm too busy to actually begin to think about that, am I not missing the boat as a leader to go, that is actually your only job, is to be able to shepherd your business through this change.
It's just brilliant. Yeah. And the job as a leader, and certainly in our space, you're working with businesses, working with leaders is, and I often say this to them, my job is to get you to the point that you have nothing to do. Because by getting you to the point that you have nothing to do, it means that you're ready for that identity shift into whatever is next. Because if you're busy, it's because you're looking at the stuff that you know that you think you should be doing. And it is doing stuff, not being stuff. Whereas when we transition to that point that you are, let's use Pareto's principle, where you're 20% in the business and you've got 80% to do something else, rather than the other way around, which most leaders are. Most leaders are, I'm busy doing, but you're busy 80% in the business and only 20% other stuff. Is making that shift. So as leaders, we should be looking for that time to go, actually, I'm doing, actually, I don't have anything to do. Awesome. Right now, take that and use that power in order to work out what should you be doing. Because the what should you be doing is where the growth in your business comes from. You got people to do the other stuff.
And the danger for New Zealand businesses, we talked about this kind of, at the beginning, everyone's been in survival mode off the back of COVID. Like, it's been a really tough 4 or 5 years for New Zealand leaders and New Zealand business. Not all sectors, but for a lot of us, it has been. But right now, more than any other time in my career, is leadership is changing, and what it means to be a leader right now. Yes, technology shifts is definitely conflating into this moment, but leaders that are too busy in the business doing, and I've been there, isn't it? It's a tunnel, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just going to put my head down and I'm going to work my way out of this. It's just I worry. Because it's not, you can't work your way out of it. The time right now is actually to stop. And I think AI does represent the opportunity to go, how could my business model evolve? AI can now map out scenarios of what could the future of my business could look like. What are my adjacent market opportunities? You still need to be up, but it's not about writing a LinkedIn post anymore. It is actually, but to do that still requires this thinking to go, what could be? And I think a lot of businesses, a lot of CEOs I talk with are missing this part of strategy, which is what could be. And AI allows us, in some ways, to completely throw out, current biases and to crystal gaze to what could be. And
I think that's a great phrase to use, because what AI can do is. You can sit down and ask a question. And yes, there are many rabbit holes out there, and there's some not great things that happen when you disappear down those rabbit holes. But you can have a very smart conversation by just asking a question. And I love that. I often say to people, and you asked me earlier on, how do you recognize that you're in panic mode? But we go from the other side. We are in panic mode. Well, one of the quickest ways to get out of panic mode is to ask yourself the question, I wonder why.
Love it.
Because as soon as you ask yourself any question, I wonder why, what have you just done? Well, you've brought yourself into community. I wonder why. You've become response able. And that's a great, that's where AI is a great tool. You can actually ask that question of someone other than just yourself, just to get the ideas flowing. Then you've got a conversation you can take out to the coffee shop, to the water cooler.
Yeah. And I think so, I like that response able, because that's, and I wonder what will happen for the rest of the year as New Zealand businesses continue to try and on their growth trajectory, but again, with this kind of level of uncertainty, we can't wait. If we are competing globally, we cannot wait to see what will happen. So, and what we also know is, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And I think a lot of leaders we work with, and I'm sure the same with you from a coaching perspective, is you can't keep doing the same thing and expect 20% growth, or like writing down on a spreadsheet or modeling where what your growth numbers might look like. It's hope. It's, and so how do we lift up to go, okay, how do I make that real? And how does that, and strategy is ambiguous in itself, but it's that idea. And I look, Gisela, the co-founder of Flux, she raised this, and this is something we've been asking businesses now. What would happen if it all burned down? What would happen if everything, and you had to start again? What would it look like? What would you do? Where would you focus? What could it be? Because if you strip all the historical stuff out and you go, right, it's all burnt to the ground, now I'm starting again, what does that look like? And that's a very interesting conversation, because some CEOs we've seen, it frees them up. You can see the weightlifting. All this stuff is gone, what could be? And suddenly that purpose, that passion, the original founder story and the reason they've sold is there. It just now needs to be applied in a modern world context, and that world has changed often drastically.
Yeah, I mean, even if you had to start again, who wouldn't be a part of the business this time around? There's lots of different ways to ask interest. There's lots of different ways to ask those questions that you get.
Oh, that's a great question.
It's a blinder, because then you suddenly go, well, yeah, but they do that and they do that and they do that, means that I'd have to think. And all of a sudden you open up. Okay, well, and it takes you down a different path, because if Bob was great on day one, but by year 3, Bob, not so much. Not through Bob's fault, just the direction of the business. But if Bob wasn't there, what else would I need instead? What could I use? Is that a technology question? Is that a person question? Is it, again, when you have the capacity, when your brain, the mind has the capacity to ask a question, that's you recognizing that you've moved out of panic mode.
I love that.
That panic mode is reaction.
Yeah, and that's that response able. And I think that it's those questions that I think, and the question, and working with a client at the moment, and I've been asking that CEO, is that activity is a low impact activity for your business in terms of your strategic priorities. Mm-hmm. Do you still want to continue to invest your time and your people's time in it? You've always done it, but it's low impact. But you have to be able to stop. Someone has to be able to ask those questions. And there are things that we do in our business, and I challenge anyone listening to think about things. And the classic is a newsletter. I know it's a bit of a marketing bent, or aspects of customer success. We've always done them. Are they valued? Mm-hmm. And if they are not valued, but they are valuable, could they be automated? Because now you're having a different discussion about trade-off of resources, right? Mm-hmm. But it all starts back to what are you trying to achieve? What's your strategy? It has to be the North Star of, would I have that person back again? Is that skill set your mission critical to where we're going, or is it a nice to have?
And that's where anyone that starts working with Unstoppable Force, the first thing we do is we set a mission statement. A proper military style mission statement. And that's the North Star until it's not. And we do check-ins every 90 days. Have we achieved the mission, or is the mission still the right mission? But it's properly directed military style activity that moves us in the right direction. And that, when things begin, and from my perspective, it always coming back to the preparation piece of, right, is this conversation even getting us closer to the mission, or is it just a nice conversation we're having? Yeah. And I think often, many organizations, the mission statements have drifted into vision statements, nice fluffy things that, but what is your North Star? Because if you don't have your North Star, then how do you know if you're moving in the right direction, or if you've made the bad call? And that's that's the value you bring with your clients. You're able to step back and go, is that still a thing, or how could we make that thing better? I agree. It's that then comes back to having the vulnerability or the willingness to sacrifice that old thing.
Yeah, and I think back to what you said, it's asking the questions. And one of the things actually was at one of the best places to work masterclasses, and I can't remember who the facilitator was. It might have been you, and I can't remember, Stu, but they said you need to set time for self-reflection where you ask yourself a question and you have an honest answer. It's only you. It is the time for you to be honest with yourself. And it's something that I definitely have been practicing. And I think the thing where I've seen the mission statement, you're right, this drift, right, where these things become words on a wall, but that mission statement and that where you use that, kind of military style, it almost becomes the war cry, doesn't it? This is the rallying. This is where you've got the banners and you've got all your, your people behind you. And this is the Braveheart moment where we're going into battle. This is what it means. This is why you follow me. This is why we're here. That's becoming so important inside businesses because connection to purpose is such a massive motivator and must be an enabler of culture as well.
All of that. It's, of course, it gives people focus. We all talk about the fact I want to be free to do my things. But what you actually want is freedom within constraints. So the mission statement gives you those constraints. What it does in terms of culture is it makes sure that you have the right people because they're mission focused. You've got the right people within that organization. And look, it's going to cause some people to leave. That's okay. You're creating space for the right people to come in, but you're also releasing those individuals to go to a culture that better suits them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But, again, this is the sacrifice that we have got to make in order to become great.
Yeah. And I think on the people piece, and the people is, if you get your people bit right, your strategy can be executed right at pace. We know that. I think we've talked about this before. But what we're seeing at the moment is this rush to redesign headcount and structure. You actually need to redesign the role, to your point, right? Not the person, the role. What is the role that is needed in that part of the business and why, and how does that help? And then you look at your structure and your headcount and the skills and the capability, kind of in that area.
Yeah, we drift to the easy. Human nature, it is. But we drift to that piece of just, we'll tinker at the edges. And I believe that the businesses of the future are the ones that are recognizing that there's hard work to do. And the hard work needs to be done now, even though we're not going to see it happening. And we may never see it happen in whatever the new world order looks like, because I believe that we're on that doorstep at the moment. But that doesn't say wait. It says build momentum, because once you've got that momentum built behind a strong mission statement, then the team you've got behind you will be able to ask those smart questions, will be response able rather than reactive.
I love that. And I think I'd just add to that, we're seeing and our prediction for that future ready leadership layer is that trust is the new infrastructure. You have to have a company where there is trust, accountability. If you don't have that, it becomes very difficult for organizations to be able to, kind of have that human accountability as visible, but also then, define and be able to understand where trust could fracture first inside a business. And if we think about the AI context, that really is around data, decisions, and customers having confidence in your business, right? Which leads to brand integrity. I think we're seeing more and more of that future ready leadership beginning to understand trust. And, that is I think to be able to be response able, you have to be vulnerable. I'd imagine, we see that because you have to, leadership has to be about saying, Don't have all the answers necessarily, but I am going to work with you to be able to, we have confidence that we know what we're doing, but we don't have all the answers. And I think governments struggle here. Governments think they have to have all the answers. Politicians feel, and I'm being New Zealand specific here, feel like they should and always have an answer. I don't think that's humanly possible. And we probably need to see a bit more vulnerability there.
Vulnerability is, that is the great sacrifice that many of us have to lean into. You're being vulnerable. And I don't think, I agree completely what you've just said about, politicians and politics. I don't think the news cycle helps anymore. In the not so distant past, I remember it that, the commander's briefing had to be finished by 5 to 6 in the evening because it gave the embedded journalist, time to get mic'd up and get onto camera for the 6 o'clock news. And it took a long, long time for the military to figure that one out. But when they did, it meant that the story flowed. But now that we're in a 24-hour news cycle, the journalists, the reporters have become very, very good at trying to grab sound bites. And that means that, again, this comes back to where we started the conversation on this session.
Yeah.
That means the politicians are panicked, reptilian brain, because they know they've got to say the right thing at the right time to the right microphone so they don't look silly. What they don't have time to do is, and we see it, people being, have you read the report that? And it's only just come out. And they're going, no, I haven't had time to read that. Oh, well, that's you. Come on, we need that time to think, because remember, thinking, asking questions brings us down into that ability to analyze and therefore ideate and innovate. Because it's constant, we fall into silly traps that then become the news cycle, the news story, not what the news story should be. And I'm using media and politics, but this is business as well. This is what we face all of the time. This comes back to that point. I'm busy. Well, you got to find a way not to be busy, because the real shifts happens when you stop creating that persona of busyness.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic place to end. Stop creating the persona of busyness. New Zealand, I think New Zealand businesses, it's one of those, how are you? Oh, I'm busy. We have to stop that. And I think that's the challenge. If you're listening, challenge to yourself. Next time someone asks you and you go to say that, think about, is that the right answer? You've got to change your story. You're not, you might be busy, but are you busy on the right things? And I would suspend if you were saying that, that's not the right thing that you should be leading with. So there's a challenge to 3 listeners, your mum, my mum, and someone else as well.
I'll tell Lizzie to listen. Totally. What a great session.